My name is Nora Weston. I grew up in a religious cult where love meant obedience and independence was a sin. At 16, my father tried to force me into a marriage I didn't choose. I had no phone, no money, no freedom. Everyone told me there was no escape. That if I tried, they would hunt me down and destroy me. But one night, I ran. And what happened after that, the fight to stay free, the courtroom battles, the betrayals, the people who saved me, it changed everything. This is my story. I read it. This is probably going to be long. I've been lurking here for a while, and seeing other people's stories made me realize I'm not crazy for wanting to talk about mine. I've never really told the whole thing before. I guess part of me is still scared. I'm 21 now. But this story starts when I was born, or honestly before that. I grew up in a religious community in southern Indiana called the Gathering of Light. My father founded it back in the 90s. To the outside world, it looks like just a small church. But on the inside, it was its own universe, with its own rules, its own language, and its own kind of fear. My dad, Pastor Jonathan Weston, wasn't just a preacher, he was treated like a prophet. What he said wasn't just law, it was the voice of God. And my mom, my younger brother Caleb, and I lived according to his plan. Every second of every day. Here's what a normal day looked like in our house. Up before dawn. 2 hours of prayer. Breakfast, plain and simple, always the same. Morning Bible study, usually several chapters, copied by hand. Chores, we lived on a farm attached to the church, and everyone was expected to contribute. Afternoon scripture lessons, more chores. Evening prayer meetings at the church. Lights out early. No music. No TV. No outside books. I was homeschooled, of course. My mom taught me using a church-approved curriculum that was mostly religious in nature. The science books left out evolution, the history books were rewritten to fit the gathering's worldview. Outside friends? None. The only kids I was allowed to interact with were other kids from the gathering. We weren't allowed to watch movies or listen to the radio. Even walking through a grocery store felt overwhelming, so many colors, sounds, images we weren't supposed to see. My dad would always say, a true light girl must be modest, quiet, and obedient. Pride is sin. Independence is rebellion. And my mom was the perfect example. She never raised her voice, never questioned him, always wore long skirts and kept her hair covered. I wanted to be good like her. I tried so hard to be good. For the first 12 or 13 years of my life, I didn't question any of it. How could I? This was the only world I knew. If you asked me then, I would have told you we were the lucky ones, the chosen ones. The world outside was full of temptation and sin, and we were protected. But cracks started to form when I was about 13. I remember the exact moment it happened, this tiny, stupid moment that shouldn't have mattered. My mom and I were in town running errands, one of the rare times we ever went into the world, and we stopped at this little cafe to get bread. There was a girl there about my age, sitting with her mom. She was laughing really laughing, head thrown back, eyes shining. And she was wearing jeans and a t-shirt with a band name on it. Something about how happy and free she looked hit me right in the chest. And for the first time in my life, I thought, why can't I be like that? It wasn't like I suddenly wanted to rebel or run away. It was just this tiny nagging thought. A feeling that maybe the world outside wasn't as evil and terrifying as I'd been taught. I tried to push it away. I told myself I was being prideful, that curiosity was sin. I prayed about it for days. But the thought stayed. After that, little things started to bother me more. Why couldn't I read normal books? Why did boys in the gathering get to study math and science, while girls mostly learned domestic arts? Why did my dad's word matter more than anyone else's, even more than my own? At night, lying in bed, I started writing secret questions in my notebook. Questions I wasn't allowed to ask out loud. I didn't know it then, but this was the start of everything. The first tiny cracks in the life I'd always believed in. I didn't tell anyone, of course. Not my mom. Not Caleb. Definitely not my dad. Questioning anything was dangerous. I'd seen what happened to people who asked the wrong questions. They get called out in church, humiliated, sometimes even shunned. So I kept quiet. I kept pretending. I kept praying. But something inside me had shifted. And nothing was ever going to be the same again. For a while I thought maybe those questions would fade. If I just prayed hard enough. If I focused harder on the teachings. I convinced myself that curiosity was weakness, that I was a bad daughter for even wondering. But it didn't fade. And then something happened that changed everything. The first real choice I ever made for myself. It started with the library. Now going to the public library was normally forbidden, too many worldly temptations, as my dad called it. But when I was 15, a few of the younger moms in the gathering convinced the elders that it might be useful for us to access certain historical archives at the city library. For genealogy work. To trace our spiritual lineage. So a small group of us girls, supervised by an older woman named Sister Ruth, were granted permission to visit the library once a week. Under strict rules. White heavy checkmark, no wandering off alone. White heavy checkmark, no checking out materials without approval. White heavy checkmark, no fiction, no music, no internet use. White heavy checkmark, only work on assigned research. I was equal parts terrified and thrilled. I'd never been in a library before. The only books I'd read were church-approved Bibles, devotionals, homemaking manuals. The idea of a whole building full of books was like something out of a fairy tale. The first time we went, I stuck close to the others, heart pounding. The building smelled like old paper and coffee. The lights were soft, the air cool. I was dizzy from it all, the shelves went on forever. Sister Ruth planted herself at a table in the genealogy section, pulled out her knitting, and told us to get to work. I was supposed to be copying birth records. But after about 20 minutes, I noticed a section labeled Young Adult Fiction. I don't know what came over me. My feet moved before my brain could stop them. I wandered into the aisle, scanning the colorful spines. So many titles, so many words I'd never seen. My hand brushed against a book with a bright pink cover. On the front was a girl about my age, smiling, standing with friends. I pulled it out. The back said something about friendship, school dances, first love, normal life. My hands were shaking. I knew this was forbidden. I knew if anyone saw me, I'd be punished. But I couldn't stop myself. I slipped the book under my sweater, heart racing. For the rest of the trip, I barely breathed. On the ride home, I stared out the window, the book hidden in my tote bag, my stomach twisted in knots. That night, after everyone was asleep, I pulled the book out and started reading by flashlight under my covers. I read the whole thing in one night. Couldn't stop. It wasn't even that remarkable, just a normal teenage story. But to me, it was like stepping into another universe. The kids in the book went to school. They had best friends. They made mistakes, but nobody said they were going to hell for it. They went to dances and wore whatever they wanted. They laughed. They lived. And suddenly, my life felt unbearably small. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just sad. Deeply, achingly sad. For the first time, I truly saw how trapped I was. How many things I'd never experienced. I cried myself to sleep with the book still in my hands. The next morning, I tucked it into the back of my closet, behind a stack of old linens. No one could ever find it. But even if they did, it wouldn't matter. Something inside me had already changed. I couldn't unsee that other world. I couldn't stop wondering what life could be like if I weren't trapped by the gathering's rules. I was terrified of these thoughts. Terrified of what it meant. If my dad even suspected, well, I'd seen what happened to rebellious girls before. Some disappeared to special retreats and came back hollow-eyed. Others got married off early to steady brothers in the church. So I kept smiling. I kept obeying. I kept playing the part. But late at night, when the house was quiet, I would pull out that book and run my fingers over the cover like a secret talisman. Because now I knew there was a different life out there. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could live without it. After that first book, everything felt different. I still looked the same on the outside. Still braided my hair in the morning, wore long skirts, spoke softly, kept my head down during church. I didn't dare act any different, not with my father watching me like a hawk. But inside, I was changing. I started noticing things. How other girls in the gathering looked tired all the time, how no one laughed during meals, how my mom's smiles never reached her eyes. How I flinched when my father's voice got sharp, and how normal that seemed to everyone around me. I didn't know what to do with these thoughts. I was scared of them. But they wouldn't stop coming. And then, almost by accident, another crack opened. It started with volleyball. One of the more progressive elders in the gathering had been pushing for us girls to have more wholesome physical activity. Something about keeping our bodies strong for God's purpose. My dad wasn't thrilled, but eventually agreed when the local sports club offered a private girls' volleyball league. To everyone's surprise, several families allowed their daughters to join, including mine. My mom was hesitant, but Dad said physical fitness was fine, as long as we stayed modest and kept our hearts pure. I don't think he expected what would happen next. The first day of practice, I was so nervous I could barely breathe. The gym was massive, bright lights, banners on the walls, shiny wood floors. It smelled like sweat and floor polish. I felt completely out of place in my long gym skirt and high-neck tee. Most of the other girls wore regular sports gear, shorts, tank tops. They looked so free, confident, like they belonged there. I kept to myself at first, staying at the back of the group. During warm-ups, I could barely focus, my heart pounding so loud it was making me dizzy. That's when I saw him. Jake Anderson. He was helping coach. Tall, broad-shouldered, black curly hair that flopped over his forehead. I guessed he was maybe 19 or 20. The girls all seemed to like him. He was friendly, easygoing, cracking jokes as he moved around correcting people's stances. I tried not to look at him. Tried to keep my head down. But halfway through practice, disaster struck. I slipped during a drill and hit the floor hard. The gym went silent for a second. My face burned with shame. I was sure everyone was staring. And then there was a hand in front of me. "You hit harder than half the team," Jake said with a crooked grin. I blinked up at him stunned. He wasn't laughing at me. He wasn't angry. His eyes were warm, kind. Like he actually saw me. My throat went dry. I managed to mumble, "I'm fine." He helped me up and gave a little nod before jogging off to the next group. The moment was over. But something inside me shifted. For the rest of practice, I couldn't stop sneaking glances at him. Not because I had some silly crush, though maybe I did a little. But because for the first time in my life, someone outside my world had treated me like a person. Not as Pastor Weston's daughter. Not as a vessel of purity or an obedient light girl. Just me. Nora. After that day, I started looking forward to practices in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't just about volleyball anymore. It was about being there. About feeling a little more free for those 2 hours. About hearing people laugh, seeing girls high-five each other, watching Jake move through the gym like it was the most natural thing in the world. And little by little, the wall I'd built around my heart began to thin. I started imagining things. What if I could go to school like these girls? What if I could wear what I wanted? What if I could talk to people without second-guessing every word? What if I didn't have to live the life my father had chosen for me? I didn't tell anyone. Not my mom. Not even in my notebook. But in the gym, with the thud of the ball echoing around me, I could almost believe those things were possible. And I didn't know it yet, but one person in that gym was about to change my life forever. By the time we were a few weeks into volleyball season, practice had become the only thing I truly looked forward to. Those 2 hours in the gym felt like stepping into a different universe. One where people laughed. One where you didn't have to pray before every single action. One where no one was watching you for signs of sin. I still wore my long gym skirt. Still kept my hair tied back tightly. Still tried not to draw attention. But I couldn't help noticing the difference between myself and the other girls. They talked about school, movies, music. About dances and parties and sleepovers. All things I couldn't begin to relate to. I would sit at the edge of the group, silent, pretending to stretch, heart aching with longing and shame. And then there was Jake. He was always there, easygoing, encouraging. Never making me feel small, even when I was clearly behind everyone else in skill. I noticed how the other girls gravitated toward him. How he treated everyone kindly like equals. But it wasn't just that. It was the way he looked at me. Not through me. Not like I was some strange sheltered girl. Just like I was a person. I thought I was doing a good job of blending in. Of staying invisible. But apparently I wasn't. One night after practice, something happened that I still can't forget. Everyone else had drifted out of the gym. I was sitting on a bench, unlacing my shoes, when Jake walked by and paused. "Hey," he said casually, leaning on the bench. "You okay?" I looked up, startled. "Yes. I'm fine." He gave me a half smile, then tilted his head. "You're always here like you're on stage. Like you're trying to do everything perfectly. Who keeps you so reserved?" The question hit me like a punch. No one had ever asked me something like that. No one had ever seen it, the tension I carried every second, the way I tried to perform the perfect image of what I was supposed to be. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I opened my mouth, then shut it again. What was I supposed to say? My father keeps me like this? My entire life keeps me like this? If I show too much joy, too much curiosity, too much independence, I'll be punished? Instead, I just whispered, "It's complicated." Jake nodded like he understood. He didn't push. He just said softly, "Well, if you ever need someone to talk to, someone who isn't in whatever world you're coming from, I'm around." And then he gave me one of those warm smiles and headed out, whistling lightly. I sat there frozen. My heart was pounding so hard it made my fingers shake. It wasn't a big moment. No declarations. No dramatic music. Just a boy being kind to a girl who didn't know what kindness without judgment felt like. But that night, when I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. No prayers helped. No Bible verses calmed the storm inside me. One simple question, who keeps you so reserved? Had shaken the foundation of everything I was taught to believe about myself. Because for the first time I realized, maybe this wasn't normal. Maybe life wasn't supposed to feel this suffocating. Maybe there was a way out. I tried to go back to how things were. I really did. I doubled down on my prayers. I worked harder during Bible study. I copied scripture until my hand cramped. I tried to convince myself that Jake's words didn't matter, that they were a temptation I had to resist. But it was like trying to put the lid back on a pot that was already boiling over. Every day, I felt more aware of how tight the gathering's rules were. How everything I did was watched, evaluated, judged. At home, things were getting worse. My father had started talking about my coming of age more and more. I had just turned 16, the age when, in the gathering, girls were expected to prepare for their next stage of life. For most, that meant one of two things. He kept 1 marriage to one of the approved brothers in the community. He kept 2 full-time service in one of the women's groups, cooking, cleaning, teaching younger children. College? A job outside the church? Leaving the gathering? Unthinkable. Forbidden. At dinner one night, my father made it clear. It's time to think about your future, daughter. God has a plan for you. We will not allow the world to corrupt you. I forced myself to nod, but inside, I was panicking. My skin felt too tight. My stomach twisted. I didn't want that life. I didn't want to marry some man I barely knew. I didn't want to be trapped in the gathering forever, a silent, obedient woman with no choices of her own. I wanted freedom, college, friends, travel, to figure out who I really was outside of the gathering. But escape felt impossible. My father controlled everything. My schedule. My access to the outside world. My mother had no power to intervene, she was just as trapped, even if she pretended otherwise. And on top of it all, there were whispers. I started noticing the way some of the older women looked at me during services. The way certain families would stop talking when I entered a room. I overheard one of the elders' wives murmuring to another, "Nora Weston is too curious about the world." The rumors were spreading. My father noticed. He started tightening his grip. No more library trips, even supervised. I wasn't allowed to linger after volleyball practice anymore. My mom was ordered to watch me more closely. Keep her grounded, my father told her. She's at a dangerous age. The world will tempt her if we are not vigilant. But it was too late. The spark had already been lit. And volleyball practice, those precious 2 hours a week, became my only refuge. Even though my father insisted I come straight home afterward, I started lingering in the locker room for an extra few minutes. Just so I could breathe. Just so I could feel like myself. Jake noticed. One evening after practice, I was sitting on the bleachers tying my shoes. Most of the girls had left. Jake was putting away equipment. He glanced over and said casually, "Rough day." I hesitated, then nodded. He didn't push. Just sat on the bench across from me, leaning forward, arms resting on his knees. After a moment, he said softly, "You don't have to tell me anything. But you look like someone who's carrying the weight of the world." That nearly broke me. I bit my lip so hard it almost bled. Part of me wanted to spill everything. To tell him about my father, the gathering, the threats hanging over my head. To tell him how trapped I felt. But fear clamped down hard. If I said too much, it could get back to my father. The consequences would be unbearable. So all I managed was, "It's complicated. I'm just tired of trying to be perfect all the time." Jake nodded slowly. "That's a heavy burden to carry alone," he said. "If you ever want to talk, I'm here." No judgment. I didn't know what to say. No one had ever offered that before, not without strings attached, not without preaching or controlling. For the first time in my life, I felt like someone saw me. Not the obedient daughter. Not the light girl. Just Nora. And walking out of that gym that night, a new thought took root in my mind. I can't live like this forever. I need to find a way out. Somehow. If there was one thing I learned growing up in the gathering, it was that you didn't question God's plan. Of course, God's plan usually looked a lot like my father's plan. And right now, that plan was rapidly closing in around me. The pressure wasn't subtle anymore. It was everywhere. During morning prayer sessions, my father started including pointed remarks about young women fulfilling their roles and the dangers of worldly temptation. At dinner, he'd quiz me on scripture passages about obedience and submission. One night, he laid it out plainly. The elders have been discussing your future. Brother Joel has expressed interest in pursuing a courtship. Brother Joel. He was 26. Quiet, grim-faced, with eyes that always seemed to weigh and measure every move you made. I remembered once hearing him describe women who wore pants as lost causes. Joel was respected in the gathering. Faithful. Dutiful. Rigid. I barely knew him. But that didn't matter. In the gathering, courtship wasn't about love. It was about duty. It was about yoking equally. And once a match was proposed, it was almost impossible to say no without consequences. If I refused, I risked being labeled rebellious, prideful, dangerous. I'd seen other girls shunned for less. I nodded quietly at the dinner table, pretending to listen. My mind was already spinning with panic. After dinner, alone in my room, I sat on my bed staring at the wall. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep them still. I couldn't do it. I could not marry Joel. I couldn't live the life they had planned for me, a life of endless submission, invisible and voiceless. I needed a way out. I thought about the book still hidden in the back of my closet, the worn pages filled with a world so different from mine. I thought about the girls at volleyball practice, laughing and free. I thought about Jake, how he had looked at me without judgment, how he had seen me. And for the first time, I let myself consider something dangerous. Something reckless. Maybe I couldn't escape alone. Maybe I needed help. The next volleyball practice, I could barely concentrate. My hands were clammy. Every nerve ending in my body was on high alert. I kept glancing over at Jake, wondering if I was insane for even thinking what I was thinking. At the end of practice, I lingered again, pretending to double knot my shoelaces. Most of the girls had left. Jake was gathering equipment, whistling under his breath. When he passed by me, I blurted out, too fast, too loud. "Can I talk to you?" He stopped, surprised. But his face softened instantly. "Of course. What's up?" I swallowed hard. My heart was hammering so loud it felt deafening. "Not here," I whispered. "Please. Somewhere private." Jake hesitated. He glanced around the gym, empty now, just the two of us and the echoes of bouncing balls and distant voices from another court. "Okay," he said gently. "Let's sit outside." We stepped into the fading evening light, sitting on a low brick wall outside the gym entrance. I fidgeted with the hem of my skirt, trying to find the words. Jake waited. Patient. Not pushing. Finally, I said, voice shaking. "I can't live like this anymore. But I don't know how to leave. They'll destroy me if I try." It was the first time I'd spoken those words out loud. The first time I'd admitted, even to myself, how trapped I really was. Jake didn't flinch. He didn't look shocked. He just leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and said, "Nora, you don't have to tell me everything. But whatever it is, you don't deserve to be trapped." I wiped my sweaty palms on my skirt. "They'll find me. They'll drag me back. I don't even have a phone, not a real one. I don't have anything." Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he said carefully, "If you're serious about leaving, I can help. I have friends. Resources. You wouldn't be alone." Tears stung my eyes. Not because I was sad, because for the first time I felt something like hope. But it was terrifying too. "I don't even know where to start," I whispered. "That's okay," Jake said. "We'll figure it out together." He said we like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like I wasn't a burden. Like I was worth helping. And sitting there on the cold brick wall with the sky darkening above us and the gym lights flickering on behind us, I made a decision. I was going to leave. I didn't know how. I didn't know when. But I was going to leave. And Jake was going to help me do it. After that night on the brick wall outside the gym, something shifted in me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just wishing for freedom, I was planning for it. That terrified me more than anything. Because in the gathering, rebellion wasn't just frowned upon. It was punished. Publicly. Harshly. I'd seen it happen. Girls sent away to the retreat, coming back hollow-eyed and silent. Families shunned. Children separated from their parents. And now I was risking all of that. But the alternative, marrying Brother Joel, spending the rest of my life trapped and voiceless, was worse. Jake and I started talking after every practice. Always outside. Always careful. He was smart about it. never texting my parents' home line, never leaving a paper trail. But there was one huge problem: I didn't have a way to contact him on my own. My father controlled all communication in our house. My mom had an old flip phone, but it stayed locked in her nightstand. I started watching for chances. One afternoon, while helping my mom change linens, I saw the phone in the drawer. That night, heart pounding, I crept into their room while they were at evening prayer. Slid the phone out. It was ancient, no internet, barely capable of texting. But it was something. I smuggled it into my room, wrapped in an old scarf, and stared at it like it was a bomb. When I finally worked up the nerve, I sent one message. "It's me. I have this phone now. Can we plan?" I didn't sleep that night. Just lay there waiting, every creak of the house making me jump. The next morning, after sneaking it back into my room during chores, I saw Jake's reply. "I'm here. We'll take it slow. First, we plan where you'll go. Then how to get you there. Simple. Steady." Like he wasn't scared at all. Like he really believed we could do this. But at home, things were spiraling fast. Rumors about me were spreading in the gathering. I caught whispers during services, words like worldly, prideful, influenced. My father noticed. He started restricting me even more. No more lingering after practice. No talking to anyone outside approved circles. My mom was ordered to watch me constantly. One night, he called a family meeting. Just the three of us: Dad, Mom, me. Caleb wasn't there. I wasn't sure if that was on purpose. "We are concerned about your spirit," my father said bluntly. "There are dangerous influences around you. You must remain pure and obedient, or you will lose your place among us." I kept my head bowed, fists clenched in my lap. "Brother Joel is ready to begin courtship," he continued. "We will announce it at the gathering next week. Unless you tell us now that your heart is unfit." My heart was unfit. Completely. But if I said that, I didn't know what they would do. So I did what I'd always done. I lied. "I am ready," I whispered. It tasted like ash. But it bought me time. Afterward, in my room, I texted Jake with shaking hands. "It's happening faster. He wants to announce my courtship next week. I don't have much time." The reply came fast. "We'll move faster. I'll figure out a place for you. Be ready." I stared at those words for a long time. Be ready? I didn't feel ready. I felt sick with fear. But deep under the fear, something else was growing: resolve. I was going to get out. Somehow. Even if it meant risking everything. The days after that family meeting were some of the worst of my life. Every minute at home felt like walking through a minefield. My father was watching me constantly. My mother hovered in the background, pale and tense, as if she knew something wasn't right but couldn't bring herself to intervene. And me? I was pretending. Smiling. Bowing my head. Acting like the perfect light daughter while inside I was screaming. I texted Jake in short bursts whenever I could sneak the old phone out of my drawer. He wants to announce it on Sunday. I don't know what happens after that. If they find the phone, they'll take everything. I'm scared. His replies were calm. Grounding. We'll do this. You're not alone. I have a place. Safe. That place turned out to be his Aunt Sandra's house a few towns over. Sandra had left an abusive marriage years ago and worked with a local crisis center now. She understood exactly what I was facing. She knows. She's ready to help. You can stay with her until we figure the next steps, Jake wrote. I couldn't believe it. An actual plan. A real place to go. But getting there? That was the part that terrified me. I couldn't just walk out the front door. I wasn't allowed to go anywhere alone, not even to the store. And my father was already suspicious. He'd shortened my leash so much that even volleyball practice was under threat. And worst of all, Caleb had started watching me too. He was only 13 but already being groomed to protect the family's values. I caught him reporting little things back to my dad, how long I was in my room, who I talked to at church. I hated it. I hated seeing my little brother turned into a spy. But there was nothing I could do. Meanwhile, Sunday, the day of the announcement, was getting closer. Every night, I lay awake going over the plan with Jake in secret texts. When? I asked. The night before the announcement, he wrote. It's safest then. Everyone will be distracted preparing for the service. How? I'll pick you up outside town. Old warehouse on Mill Road. You know it. I did. Barely. I remembered passing it once as a child on the way to a market. It had been abandoned for years. What should I bring? Whatever you can carry. Clothes. Important papers if you have any. We'll handle the rest. I didn't have papers. Barely had clothes that would fit in outside the gathering. But I did have one thing, the little notebook where I'd written my secret questions over the years. And the book I'd taken from the library. They would go with me, no matter what. The final piece of the plan was set 3 nights before Sunday. Jake's text came through late. Everything is ready. Aunt Sandra knows. You'll be safe there. Be at the warehouse by midnight Saturday. I'll be waiting. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. This was it. The point of no return. And for the first time, I felt something new. Not just fear. Not just panic. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could actually do this. I didn't think it was possible to feel more trapped than I already had. But the final day before my escape, before what was supposed to be my courtship announcement, showed me just how far my father would go to control me. It started the moment I woke up. My mom was already in my room folding clothes. She usually knocked. Not this time. Your father wants us to prepare everything for tomorrow, she said flatly. We'll be having guests after the service. You'll need to look your best. My stomach twisted. Guests. Meaning Joel's family. Meaning my life being handed off like some kind of prize pig at a fair. I forced myself to nod, barely trusting my voice. All day I was shadowed. My mom didn't leave me alone for a second. Every chore, every errand, every meal, she was right there. Watching. By afternoon I was sweating with fear. How was I supposed to pack anything? How was I even going to get out of the house? I managed one small window during afternoon prayer while my parents were downstairs and Caleb was out feeding the goats. Hard hammering, I slipped into my room, locked the door, and yanked my backpack from the back of the closet. It wasn't much. A change of clothes. The library book. My notebook full of secret questions and poems. The old phone Jake and I had been using tucked deep into a side pocket. I wanted to bring more. I wanted to bring everything. But there wasn't time, and anything more would slow me down. I zipped the bag shut and shoved it under my bed, hidden behind a stack of folded quilts. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely finish. That night at dinner, my father was in a strangely good mood. Tomorrow will be a blessed day, he said. The congregation will rejoice in your commitment, Nora. I kept my head down, face burning, throat too tight to speak. She will make a fine wife, my mother said quietly. But her eyes looked hollow. I wondered for the first time if she had wanted something different for herself once long ago. After dinner, there was no evening service, a rare thing. My father said we needed rest for tomorrow. But I wasn't going to rest. Every second was now a countdown. Midnight couldn't come fast enough. When my parents went to their room around 9:30, I stayed awake in the dark, heart pounding, listening to every creak of the old house. I texted Jake one word. Ready. He replied instantly. On my way. See you soon. You've got this. I stared at those words, blinking back tears. I couldn't believe this was real. After all the years of being told escape was impossible, of being taught that the outside world would destroy me, here I was, about to walk away from everything I'd ever known. Or try to. There was still one more terrifying part left. Getting out of the house without anyone seeing. Midnight. I must have checked the clock 50 times. Every tick felt like thunder in my ears. My parents' room was down the hall. I strained to hear any movement, nothing yet. The house was old, full of creaks, so even one wrong step could wake them. I had one shot. One window of time. If they caught me. I couldn't think about that. At 12:15, I finally moved. I slid the backpack out from under the bed and pulled it on. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. First obstacle, the door. The hinges squeaked if you opened it too fast. I eased it open inch by inch, breath held. A soft creak, but nothing stirred. Step by step, I crept down the hall, avoiding the boards I knew would groan under my weight. Past Caleb's room, his door was cracked open, but I heard his steady breathing. Past my parents' room, door closed, blessedly silent. The stairs were the worst. That third step from the top always popped. I skipped it entirely, heart racing, legs shaking. Down in the entryway, I almost lost my nerve. The front door had a heavy lock. Turning it made a loud click. I hesitated, listening. Silence. Do it, I told myself. Now or never. I turned the lock as slowly as I could, barely breathing. It clicked louder than I wanted, but no footsteps came. I pulled the door open just wide enough to slip through. The cold night air hit me like a slap. I nearly gasped but bit it back. I eased the door shut behind me, not daring to lock it again. The bolt would have been too loud. And then, I was outside. Truly outside. I ran. Not fast, too much noise but steady. Down the gravel path, through the trees at the edge of our property, out toward the old service road that led to Mill Road. Every shadow looked like someone following me. Every snap of a twig made my skin crawl. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. The warehouse came into view like a ghost, hulking and dark, half covered in vines. My legs were trembling so badly I thought I'd collapse before I reached it. And then headlights. A car. For one frozen second I thought it was my father's truck. My blood turned ice cold. Then I saw him, Jake. He was leaning against the driver's door, hands in his pockets scanning the road. When he saw me, his face broke into relief. Nora. I ran the last few feet, gasping for breath, and practically collapsed into his arms. You did it, he whispered, pulling me into a fierce hug. You're safe now. You did it. I couldn't stop shaking. I couldn't even speak. I just clung to him like I was drowning. After a minute, he guided me into the car. We're going straight to Sandra's. You'll be safe there, he said gently. It's going to be okay. As we pulled away from the warehouse, I looked back once, at the road that led home. And for the first time, I didn't feel like it was home anymore. It was a cage. And I had finally broken free. The drive to Sandra's felt like a dream. I was huddled in the passenger seat, backpack on my lap, staring out into the dark. My body felt numb. My mind was racing. Part of me kept waiting for headlights to appear behind us, for my father's truck to come roaring up, for him to drag me out of the car and back to the gathering. But the road stayed empty. Jake kept glancing at me, voice soft and steady. You did it, Nora. I'm proud of you. You're safe now. Just breathe. But breathing felt hard, because now that I was out, it was hitting me. I had left. I had really left. And I had no idea what was going to happen next. Sandra lived about 40 minutes away, in a small town I'd only heard of in passing. Her house was older, cozy. A 2-story place with ivy on the porch and a small garden in front. When we pulled into her driveway, the porch light was on. Sandra herself was waiting at the door. I didn't know what to expect. Jake had said she was kind, that she understood. But part of me still expected coldness, judgment. Instead, when I stepped out of the car, Sandra opened her arms and hugged me. Not a stiff, polite hug, a real one. Warm and steady. You're safe here, sweetheart, she said. Come inside. Inside, everything smelled like lavender and something baking, cinnamon maybe. It was warm. Soft. Not like home. Not like the gathering's cold, rigid walls. I stood in the entryway, frozen. I didn't know where to put my shoes. I didn't know if I should bow my head. I didn't know if I was even allowed to sit without permission. Sandra seemed to sense it. You don't need to ask for anything here, Nora, she said gently. You're not under anyone's control. You can sit, stand, go where you like. You're safe. That made my throat close up. I bit back tears. We sat in the kitchen, me, Jake, Sandra. They made me tea, though my hands shook so much I could barely hold the cup. I told them what had happened, about the courtship announcement, about sneaking out, about the fear. Sandra listened without interrupting. Jake kept a steady hand on mine. We'll contact the crisis center first thing tomorrow, Sandra said. They can help with legal protection, with next steps. You don't have to go back. Not ever. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But my head was full of what ifs. What if my father came for me? What if the gathering tried to claim I'd been abducted? What if they sent someone to bring me back by force? The fear was bone deep. Sandra showed me to a small guest room upstairs, the first real room of my own I'd ever had. There were books on a shelf, a soft quilt on the bed, a window that looked out on the garden. I stood there staring for a long time. I didn't know how to be in a room like this. When Jake came to say goodnight, I finally broke. I don't know how to do this, I whispered. I'm free, but I don't know what to do. I feel wrong. He pulled me into a hug. You're not wrong, he said quietly. You've been told lies your whole life. It's going to take time. But you're safe now. And you're not alone. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I should have felt free. But mostly, I felt empty. Terrified. I had no idea who I was outside the gathering. No idea what came next. All I knew was this. There was no going back. The next morning felt unreal. I barely slept. Every noise outside made me jolt awake, convinced it was my father coming to drag me back. When the sun finally came up, Sandra knocked softly on my door. "Whenever you're ready, we'll go to the crisis center," she said. "They already know you're coming. They're ready to help." Help? The word sounded foreign. I wasn't used to people helping me, not without expecting something in return. At breakfast, Jake showed up with his old backpack stuffed with snacks, notebooks, anything I might need. He gave me a small, reassuring smile. "We've got this, Nora," he said. "One step at a time." I nodded, but my stomach was in knots. I couldn't eat. The crisis center was in a small office building that looked ordinary from the outside, brick walls, potted plants in the lobby. But inside it was full of warmth. A counselor named Marissa greeted us with a kind smile and led us to a private room. I was shaking so hard by the time we sat down that Sandra had to hold my hand. "You're safe now, Nora," Marissa said softly. "You did an incredibly brave thing getting out. We're going to help you stay safe." Then came the hard part, telling my story. Piece by piece, I described life in the gathering. The control. The punishments. The forced obedience. The upcoming forced marriage. By the time I finished, Marissa's eyes were damp. "You've been through so much," she said. "This is abuse, Nora, deep, systemic abuse. And we're going to help you fight back." They helped me file an initial police report, not accusing anyone of physical harm yet, but documenting the coercion, the isolation, the emotional control. "Your father may try to claim you were abducted," Marissa warned. "We need to be ready. We'll make sure law enforcement knows this was your choice." Hearing that out loud made my chest tighten. My choice. But would anyone believe that? By the time we left the center, my phone, the old flip phone, had blown up with missed calls. Unknown numbers. And a text. "Nora, come home now. You are being misled. We can forgive this if you return immediately. Do not ruin your life. My father." I showed it to Marissa. She nodded grimly. "That's intimidation. We'll document it." Later that day it got worse. Jake got a call from a friend still in town. My father had already filed a report claiming I'd been abducted. He was trying to frame Jake as a predator, a manipulator. I felt sick. "They'll believe him," I whispered. "He's respected. He's a pastor. Everyone will side with him." "Not everyone," Jake said firmly. "And not the court. We have proof, Nora. You're here willingly. You spoke to the police. You spoke to the crisis center." But I couldn't stop the fear spiraling through me. I'd spent my whole life believing my father controlled the world, the law, the church, the community. Part of me still couldn't believe anyone would listen to me. That night, back at Sandra's, we got the news. A court hearing had been scheduled. My father was claiming I'd been kidnapped and was demanding an emergency order to force my return. "You'll need to testify," Sandra said gently. "Tell the court what happened. They need to hear it from you." Testify? In court? Against my own father? The thought made me want to crawl out of my skin. But I also knew one thing. If I didn't fight, they'd drag me back. And this time, I'd never get another chance. I barely slept the night before the hearing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's face, cold, furious. I heard his voice in my head, "Pride is sin. Disobedience will be punished." The idea of standing in a courtroom, telling strangers everything I had been taught to hide, it made me want to be sick. But I had no choice. If I didn't fight, they would force me back. The gathering would close around me tighter than ever. I knew exactly what they'd do, discipline me until I broke, marry me off to Joel, erase any trace of who I really was. I wasn't going to let that happen. Jake drove me to the courthouse with Sandra in the front seat. Outside the courthouse, protesters from the gathering were already gathering, not a huge crowd, but enough. They held signs, "Bring Nora home. She is being misled." I ducked my head, heart pounding. Inside, the courtroom felt huge and cold. Nothing like the small, warm spaces of Sandra's house or the crisis center. My father was already there, sitting stiff and stone-faced in a dark suit. Beside him, 2 lawyers and several elders from the gathering. My mother wasn't there. Neither was Caleb. I didn't know if they weren't allowed or if they'd chosen not to come. When my father saw me enter, his eyes narrowed. No surprise. No warmth. Just pure icy fury. Jake squeezed my hand as we sat down. "You can do this," he whispered. The judge was a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice. As the hearing started, my father's lawyers painted a picture of me as a confused minor who had been groomed and abducted by an older boy from outside the faith. My client's daughter has been led astray, one of them said smoothly. She is not in her right mind. She belongs with her family and her faith community. I felt my stomach twist. The words sounded so reasonable, so polished. Would the judge believe them? Then it was my turn to speak. The judge looked at me kindly. Nora, you can take your time. Tell us in your own words, why did you leave? I stood, legs shaking, throat tight. I clutched my notebook like a lifeline. And somehow, the words came. I told them everything. About the endless control. About being forced into submission. About the courtship I didn't want. About sneaking out because it was the only way to escape. I spoke about the prayers, the punishments, the threats. About never having freedom or a choice or even the right to think for myself. At first my voice shook, but as I kept going, something inside me steadied. Because for the first time, maybe in my whole life, I was speaking the truth out loud. In front of witnesses. In front of my father. When I finished, the room was dead silent. I risked a glance at my father. His face was stone. His fists were clenched on the table. But beneath the fury I saw something new, fear. Because I wasn't the obedient daughter anymore. I wasn't silent. And they couldn't control me here. The judge recessed to review the evidence. The crisis center's report, my police statement, records of the gathering's practices. I sat back down, shaking. Jake pulled me into a quick hug. I'm proud of you, he whispered. An hour later the judge returned. Her ruling was clear. I would not be forced to return. My father's claims of abduction were denied. Temporary emancipation was granted while a full evaluation was conducted. A no-contact order was issued against my father and the gathering elders. When the judge finished reading, I burst into tears. Not from fear this time, but from sheer relief. I was free. Not fully, not forever. There were still more battles ahead. But for now, they couldn't drag me back. As we left the courtroom, I felt my father's eyes burning into my back. But I didn't turn around. I walked out with my head held high. Because I had spoken the truth. And no matter what happened next, I wasn't going to be silent again. For days after the court hearing, it didn't feel real. I kept expecting someone to show up at Sandra's door. Police, elders, my father himself. Some part of me still believed they would find a way to pull me back. But no one came. The no-contact order held. The gathering was officially barred from reaching out. I was safe. And yet, I didn't feel safe. For the first time in my life I had choices, but that terrified me. Sandra was endlessly patient. She never pressured me. Never made me feel like I had to get better on a schedule. You've been through hell, Nora, she said gently. Healing takes time. You're allowed to rest. But I didn't know how to rest. I didn't know how to choose. Even the smallest things, picking what to wear, deciding what to eat, sent me spiraling with anxiety. I was used to being told exactly what to do, what was right, what was wrong. Now everything was open. And that openness felt overwhelming. Jake helped in ways I can't even describe. He didn't push. He didn't treat me like I was broken. He just showed up to cook breakfast with me, to take me on long walks through the town, to sit with me in the evenings when the nightmares got too bad. You don't have to be perfect, he reminded me again and again. You just have to be here. Therapy helped too, slow, painful work. My crisis counselor diagnosed me with complex PTSD. We spent weeks untangling the knots in my mind. The guilt. The fear of making wrong choices. The belief that love meant submission. One of the hardest parts was dealing with my mother. After the court hearing, she reached out quietly, through Sandra's lawyer. I am no longer living at the gathering, her letter said. I see now what I allowed to happen. I was afraid. I still am. But I want to know if one day you can forgive me. Reading that nearly broke me. I hadn't let myself think about her. About how much I missed her, how angry I was at her, how lost she must be now. For weeks I didn't reply. I wasn't ready. When I finally did, it was cautious. A short letter. I'm not ready to see you. But I don't hate you. I hope one day we can talk. It wasn't forgiveness yet. But it was a start. In the middle of all this, life kept moving. Sandra enrolled me in GED prep courses. I started attending therapy twice a week. Jake took me to bookstores, parks, small cafes, places I'd never been allowed to go. Every new experience felt like a tiny rebellion. And slowly, so slowly, I started to feel like a real person. Not just Pastor Weston's daughter. Not just a light girl. Nora. Someone who could laugh. Someone who could say no. Someone who could dream about a future that was her own. It was messy. It was terrifying. But it was mine. It's been 5 years since the night I ran. Sometimes that still feels impossible to say. 5 years since I stood trembling in that old warehouse parking lot, terrified of what would happen next. So much has changed since then. The court battles dragged on for months. My father fought hard, tried to reverse the no-contact order, tried to frame me as mentally unstable, claimed Jake had corrupted me. But with the crisis center's help, with therapy records, with support from Sandra and Jake, we won. I was granted full emancipation before my 17th birthday. My father's legal influence over me was permanently severed. The gathering was forced to back off, at least publicly. I haven't seen my father since the final court date. He still tries to send letters sometimes through old acquaintances or distant family. I don't open them. I'm not ready and maybe I never will be. My mother eventually left the gathering completely. It wasn't easy. It took her almost 2 years to fully disentangle herself. We're rebuilding our relationship slowly. She's in therapy now too. We meet once or twice a month for coffee. There are still walls between us, pain that can't be erased, but we're trying. I haven't seen Caleb. He's still living with my father. That breaks my heart every day. I can only hope that one day he'll reach out. That he'll find his own way to freedom. As for me, I'm finishing my degree in psychology with a focus on trauma and recovery. I work part-time at a support center for survivors of abuse. I run a small online support group for others trying to leave high-control groups. Some days the work is hard. Some days the stories break me all over again. But I keep going because if I can help even one person escape what I did, it's worth it. And Jake? He's still here. We took things slow, very slow. He never pushed, never rushed me. We built a relationship based on trust, honesty, and choice. We live together now in a small house with a messy garden. We have a dog named Toby who thinks he owns the entire backyard. Last year, on a quiet afternoon in the park, Jake asked me, no big proposal, no audience, just the two of us sitting on a bench. Do you want to marry me? Only if it's what you really want, not because anyone expects it. I laughed. I cried. I said yes. Because for the first time in my life, I was saying yes because I wanted to. Our wedding wasn't huge. No fancy church, no elaborate traditions. Just friends, family who truly loved us, and the people who had stood by me when everything else fell apart. Sandra walked me down the aisle. When I looked out at the crowd and saw my mother sitting in the front row, crying openly, cheering for me, it felt like the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. Now, I'm still healing. I still wake up from nightmares sometimes. I still flinch when I hear certain phrases, certain tones of voice. But I also laugh more than I ever thought I could. I wear what I want. I speak my mind. I choose who I spend time with. And when I look in the mirror, I don't see a scared, obedient light girl anymore. I see Nora Weston, a survivor, a woman with a life that belongs to her and no one else. And if anyone reading this is where I once was trapped, terrified, thinking escape is impossible, please hear this. It is possible. You can survive. You can rebuild. And there are people out here, like me, who will fight to help you do it.